gentlemen, we'll start, of course, with our keynote speaker of the first technical session. And he is the CEO of American Society of Appraisers, Mr. Johnny White, and I would request him to come to the podium and deliver his address.
Okay, it's a pleasure to be here. I spent the last few days in Singapore prior to coming here with the International Values organization. Had a wonderful time there in Singapore. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I learned in Singapore with the IVS in terms of providing standards. As stated, my name is Johnny White. I'm the CEO for the American Society of Appraisers. This organization is one of the oldest organizations with many members across the world. I am not, I'll tell you a little bit about myself, I am not an evaluator. I have not provided evaluation for anything, but I have a manager of large organizations. My background is managing medical associations. So you would ask, why would an individual that has been managing medical associations for so many years go to another organization that has nothing to do with medical or medicine? Well, I can tell you today that there is really no difference between physicians and valuers. A physician provides an opinion about a disease state or a drug or something of that nature, and as an evaluator, you provide your opinion too. So there's really no difference there. But what I have found being in this organization so far is that there is no awareness of this profession, and that's what we need to change. So I'll talk a little bit about that work framework. So I want to first talk about, give you some information about ASA, because this gives you an idea of a framework that we have been doing in the US for many years now, and how we could take this and do it across the board. Okay, now it's not going forward there. There we go. All right, so my talk is going to talk about ASA, give you an idea of framework where we talk about standards, government oversight, and professional credentialing. Now, ASA, again, an organization that has been around for many years. We develop standards, we provide professional designation, we foster professional excellence, we provide valuation education to our members and individuals that are seeking education. We seek to attain recognition of valuation profession, and we promote research and development in all fields of evaluation. ASA is a not-for-profit organization, which is very important. And why I say that is we're an organization that does collect revenue from individuals that are paying membership dues, individuals that are going to our courses, but we put that back into the organization in order to support this profession. That is different than a number of organizations that are out there where the money is not necessarily going back into the profession, and that's something that we strive ourselves on in terms of putting the money back into the organization and also into the profession. The very unique thing about ASA is we represent all of the 6 disciplines of valuers. We have the appraisal, review, and management. We have business valuation. We have gym and jewelry. And we have machine and technical specialties. We have personal property, and we have real property. All of these 6 disciplines make up the organization. So it makes very unique organization, but it also provides us a very large voice when it comes down to representing valuation. ASA has a governance structure. We have 19 board members, and these board members represent all of the different disciplines that I just described. And we also have board members that represent the different regions. We have 66 chapters throughout the world. We have chapters in the US, we have chapters in Europe, we have chapters in the Asia Pacific area. So these individuals that are members also participate on a local level through the chapters that go up to the headquarters. Now, one of the things that ASA strives itself on is education. We develop a number of educational programs throughout the year for each of these different disciplines. So if you're in the gym and jewelry discipline, there is education related to that. If you're in the business valuation discipline, there's education for that. We strive ourselves into continuing to provide education for our valuers. The POV courses, these are principles of evaluation. Again, we have these segmented in each of the disciplines. We educate 2,200 students annually throughout the year. And this is done through online programs. This is done through on-site programs. We even go as far as going to companies and educating all of their employees on the education that we provide. Now, in order to be a member of ASA, there are process that you have to take, and that process is going through our requirements and related to our POV courses. And then once you're accredited, you have to continue with your education throughout the years in order to keep up with that accreditation. Now, what is very, very important to this industry and to ASA is standards. In the U.S., there is a standards called the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisers Practice. That's called USPAP. So all of our members have to follow USPAP. But if you are a member or individual that's outside the U.S., you're following the IVS standards, the International Value Standards. And then members that are in Canada follow different standards. Now you see here, there's 3 different standards. We have the U.S. standards, the international standards, and then some countries have their own standards. Now I can tell you today, after being in Singapore at the IVS, we are, as a profession, is moving towards trying to align our standards to one standards. In order for this industry to be recognized more professionally, is that we have to speak with one voice. And I think through our involvement with IVS, we're going to be able to do that. And giving you an example, in Canada, they have their own standards, but they are moving towards adopting the IVS standards, so that it will be the standards that they will be following for the entire country. The U.S., it will take us some time to get to that point because we have the USPAP standards, and those are regulated by our government. Another thing that's very important to us is code of ethics. We require all of our members or anybody that's involved in the organization to understand the code of ethics. So there is a process that an individual has to go through when it comes down to code of ethics, and then we will test them to ensure that they are following those code of ethics. That is very important in this industry, in this profession, that you have ethics, you have high standards of ethics. And so we continue to ensure that our members, individuals in our profession, are following those code of ethics. Now, there's 2 categories of membership within ASA. There's the accredited member. We want to make sure that we have individuals that have experience. So you have to have 2 years of experience, and that's roughly 4,000 hours of appraisal experience. In the U.S., we call it appraisal. Outside the U.S., we call it evaluation. Once you have that experience and have met the educational requirements, again, those POV courses, have developed a report, then you can become a member of the organization at the accredited member. Now, once you've gained more experience, 5 years of experience, which is about 10,000 hours of valuation experience, then you become what we call an ASA accredited senior appraiser member. So you have the 2-year, and then you have the 5-year, and then once you are a member, you have to go and ensure that you're maintaining your education. You go through a reaccreditation process. So we require all of our members to get 20 hours of credit each year, and at the end of the 5 years, they need 100 hours. So that ensures that our members, our individuals, the individuals that are in this profession are keeping up with the education to ensure that they are providing the right services to their customers. So that was just an understanding of the organization, ASA, and I give that as an example as I go into the next part of providing a recommendation on the framework of the profession, the value profession. So in framework, you need 3 categories. You need standards, you need government oversight, and you need professional credentialing. these are the items that are going to help this profession become more mature. As I stated earlier, I come from a background that has managed medical associations, so everyone knows what a doctor is. Everyone knows what a CPA is. Everyone knows what a lawyer is. But unfortunately, and this was a surprise to me as I came into this industry, there is not a lot of people who know what a valuer is, and that has to change. In order for us to change, we have to come together as a unit or a profession that's speaking with one voice. And in order for us to do that, we have to develop a framework. So I'll go through a little bit in terms of what I see as developing framework. First is the standards. As I stated, I was in Singapore at the IVS meeting. I feel very strongly that in order for us to speak with one voice, we have to follow the same standards. Now, that doesn't mean that you cannot have certain standards or certain criteria that is specific to your country. That is perfectly okay, and that's an example in the U.S. We do have what we call USPAP. We are doing what we call a bridging, looking at what's in the IVS standards and what's in USPAP, and developing a bridging document to show that the similarities between the two. But we are moving towards our standards being very in line with IVS. Now, that's also happening outside the U.S. In many, many countries, and I think to date we have 66 countries that are following the IVS standards. And then those countries that do not have the IVS standards, they're looking at ways that they can do similar to what we're doing in the U.S., comparing it and seeing what areas that are very similar, and then some areas that they specifically have to do for their countries. But again, I think this is a start from a standard standpoint. We all have to speak from the same guidelines, and the IVS is going to help us do that. So that's standards. Next is government oversight. Now, I can say again from the U.S. standpoint, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, you don't necessarily want the government meddling in your business. You want them to help you. You want them to support you, but you do not want them to set your guidelines. You do not want them to set your designations. You do not want them to make all the rules, but you want them to support you. So what you want to do is, your oversight should ensure compliance, not override. Again, I emphasize not override your standards. Have them support you, but not necessarily set the standards. If you have their support, then that makes it easier for you and as you're moving forward with developing the profession. Another thing about government oversight, can provide direct oversight of appraisers, but if so, should be centralized. One of the issues in the U.S. is we do have government involvement, but it's not the best involvement. As you take, for example, the real property appraisers, real property valuers, they have segmented out to the states. So there's no central, as I stated in the first slide, there's no centralization of how the government is involved because they've given it to the states, and the states are setting their own guidelines. So if you're working in one state in the U.S., maybe a little bit different in another state in the U.S. So that's, again, that centralization goes away. That is something that I do not recommend for any country where you have some type of government oversight. Let it be centralized and not be parsed out to different regions of your country. Valuers who are performing assignments with direct government interests can provide more specific requirements for performance beyond those established in standards or professionals. So if a valuer is working directly with the government, then the government can provide some more oversight. But again, you don't want them to establish the standards, and you don't want them to lead the requirements for the professional credentialing. So we talked about standards, and then we talked about government oversight. Again, government oversight, you don't want them to be under the hood, if I say. Let them be in the car, but not let them be in the hood. And I hope I'm not offending any of our government officials, but just helping set the stage. And then the next thing is a VPO. ASA is a VPO in the U.S. There are multiple VPOs in the U.S. One thing that's very unique about the VPO that we are, and as I stated earlier, we represent all of the 6 disciplines of VPO. So we're very we're sitting in a unique situation whereby we can set the process for all of the evaluation profession rather than some of the other organizations that they are specific to one discipline. So you want a VPO that's going to establish, who's qualified to hold evaluation credentialing and perform assignments in compliance with the standards. So that the VPO is going to be the one that's pushing the standards out to the public, to the members, and all of the profession. If you have that VPO, that's going to be your advocate to ensure that everyone is following the rules. One of the things you also want to do with the VPO, and similar to, again, as I stated in ASA, you have tiered credentialing. As I stated earlier with our organization, the first tier is you have to have 2 years of experience. The second tier is you have to have 5 years of experience. And then we actually go into a little bit more deeper tiers as we look at different disciplines. Like gym and jewelries, they have a tier of being master gym and jewelers. And then there's other categories within our disciplines. But that allows multiple individuals from multiple backgrounds to be part of the organization, and that allows them, let's say that they don't have all of the 5-year experience, they can at least come in at the 2-year experience. And then just recently we started another category where we're calling it our ally membership, where you are in the field, you may have a state license, so that allows you to be part of the organization. But again, it helps get everyone under one umbrella, because the more people you have under that umbrella, the better you are in terms of representing that profession. VPO required both initial credentialing and reaccreditation with meaningful CE credit. So one thing you have to remember with a VPO, as you start VPOs or you have a VPO, the VPO is going to develop the credentialing. But it doesn't stop there. You have to continue to develop education in order to ensure that the profession is increasing their knowledge, or if there's new things that are happening in the field, the VPO is the place that they're going to come to in order to get education on those different items. And then very, very important is providing ethics oversight. You need an organization that's going to look at the ethics of the profession, of the individuals. If you don't have ethics, then that's when the government is going to start to come in, because you have to have the ethics in place. And if you don't, then again, that's where you're going to have issues with the government. And unfortunately, that was the situation in the U.S. for the real property situation years ago, and that's why they came in and, again, segmented out to the states, and now the states are regulating these things. So, in a nutshell, these are what I feel the pillars of framework. Standards, again, setting the standards, and again, I highly support the IVS standards, because it's, again, a foundation that can be used across multiple countries. Again, and you, as a country, you don't necessarily have to adopt everything. There are some areas where it's going to be really related to the local jurisdiction of that country in terms of what needs to be done and what doesn't need to be done. But you're starting with a foundation with the IVS. Government oversight. Again, you want the government there, but you don't necessarily want them to lead the entire process. That's what your VPO is there for. But you have support from the government. And then credentialing, having a body of education, ethics, process for these individuals in order for them to understand what needs to be done within the profession and continue to be educated on what needs to be done in the profession. So when that happens, when you have a VPO, when you have the government having some part of it, you have harmonization. This is an example of harmonization for the IVS. These are a number of organizations that support the IVS. You have a number of VPOs, as you see ASA is there, but we have a number of other organizations inside the U.S. and outside the U.S. that are supporting IVS. Then you have a number of valuer organizations that are supporting the IVS. So harmonization is showing that we have one voice that's really representing the profession, and that's key in order for us to do what I stated at the beginning of this conversation, that is increasing the awareness of this profession. I stated again, We all know what a doctor is. We all know what a CPA is. We all know what a lawyer is. But we do not know what a valuer is. And in order for us to do that, we have to come together as one in order to make our voices heard in a larger standpoint and increasing awareness about this profession. I'm going to skip that part. Just one little plug, ASA, our organization has an international conference every year. This past year was in New York, and next year it's going to be in Chicago in October. Thank you very much.
Much, Mr. White. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to now invite our next speaker, and of course, a very distinguished dignitary, to deliver his address. He's none other than Mr. Vijay Garg, the Chairman, Council of Architecture. With his core competences and extensive work in architectural education as a profession and in professional bodies like IIA and Council of Architecture, Mr. Vijay Garg is well known and recognized for his organizing skills and commitment for betterment of architectural education. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me welcoming none other than Mr. Vijay Garg to deliver his address.
Thank you, madam, and very happy to be joining with you all today. Even though I am a last-minute entry to this forum, I was busy somewhere else, but on the insistence of and importance of the topic and insistence of Mr. Vinay Goel, I am here. Dr. Sahoo and dignitaries on the dais and off the dais, delegates, valuers, and my friend architects here. I'm basically trying to speak on the regulatory framework, a experience of architecture or Architects Act, which was enacted in 1972. What does regulatory framework brings to you? What are the problems and what could be the benefits? Architects Act, you know, it is created in 1972. Any act or any regulatory framework is basically not to benefit a professional, but to benefit the general public at large. That is the basic understanding which we need to have. Most of the architects' friends have that misunderstanding that the Architects Act was created to benefit the architects. It is basically for the benefit of the general public, which the government creates the regulatory framework, which we need to understand. So once the regulatory framework is created, it will be created for the benefit of the general public. And the government is trying to do that, but it brings twofold benefits to the profession or any profession. One is that people know who is competent to deliver the service. For that, what is a pitfall in the Architects Act? The service of architects is not defined. So that need to be defined in any regulatory framework. What is the scope and service of a defined professional called valuer, if we define the valuer service? What is the valuer service, and what service only a registered valuer can deliver, no other profession? The other basic importance, basic problem when we create a regulatory framework for a profession like valuers is it encompasses number of professions which already have many regulatory bodies. So we have people who are registered elsewhere, but they practice profession of valuation. How do we address that issue that the people who are registered there and their competence and their primary qualification to practice valuation, who can and what kind of competence? How do we define the entry-level qualification to enter or get registered as a valuer? Being a basic qualification only as an architect or an engineer or a chartered accountant or a lawyer, everybody has different competence, but that competence bring in certain kind of an importance which can be valuable to the profession of valuers, and everybody practices. So how do we filter that? And how do we shortlist? How do we define the entry-level qualification? Because, and when we create a regulatory framework, what happens to the people who are actually already registered or already practicing the profession? It is a large number, and the people who may or may not have the requisite qualification, which may be defined later by the Act or by the regulatory framework. But in the regulatory framework, it is necessary that the qualification and the procedure is defined, because it has to have some legal sanctity and understanding. Because ultimately, this regulatory body is going to prosecute the lawyers not discharging their services defined in the regulatory framework. That is the job of the regulatory framework, and that is where the regulation brings in. That I think Mr. Sahoo will be able to live, because what my experience is, when I joined Council of Architecture as elected representative representing the state of Delhi, and I thought I have a different role, but when I went there and I was apprised of the functions, how do we work, and when I actually became the president, I came to know that a lot of things which people have perception that the council can do, council can actually not help architects or the professional, it can help general public. But because if we have very well laid out regulatory framework, it can definitely promote the profession or promote the cause of the profession, but in the interest of the people of the jurisdiction in which the regulatory framework is applicable. Because, and then we are facing these problems. That is what I'm saying, because in regulatory framework, how does you choose the representatives? How the regulatory framework, how does that council work? In our council, like, we have representation from all the state governments of the country. And then we have some people who are elected from the practicing professionals from the Institute of Architects. And then we have educational institution which elect the people from education. But where does the educational qualification or educational institution figure out here in the valuation profession? What kind of qualification, what kind of educational background we are talking about? That need to be actually looked into very carefully, because that is where the basic problem comes when we say, okay, this person is qualified, this person is not qualified, and if qualified, to what extent? What are the scope? Because in the valuation profession itself, when nobody is competent to do entire valuation or of all sectors of valuation in a particular industry. We have to have different expertise in different areas. So what segment is represented by how do we categorize that? So all that, because the Council of Architecture experience that we have everything very good, that we have representation from the education, we have the right to set minimum standards for education, we can define whom to register, how to register, but the basic problem which we face when people practice, they are not given their dues, how do we protect that interest is not within the purview of the council, because we can only control the people who are registered with us. Anybody cheating them is not within our purview, that goes to the general law. So that is another, because if we think that if we are regulated, will help. Regulated only help to the level that people know that this profession and these professions work and contribution, and whom to hire for a particular service. As of today, nobody knows who is the competent person and whom to be hired for a particular service in terms of a valuation sector. Because I myself has experienced that when one of my client approached, sir, you can give me a valuation certificate, but most of the things which I even don't know, but some banks will recognize an architect giving a certificate, or some people want a registered valuation valuer in the Wealth Tax Act. Some people will say, okay, it has to be under Insurance Act, and blah, blah. There's so many people, and then when we talk of plant and machinery, then we have to say, okay, any mechanical engineer, and who is certifying, how do we control? I think regulatory framework, I must congratulate to the extent to the government and to Mr. Sahoo, at least, and institutional values, to at least thinking of bringing a regulatory framework which will actually bring in importance to the profession of valuers and promote the cause of valuation. The people will understand what is a valuer, what is his contribution to the society, and how does it benefit a particular industry or a particular person. When we talk about experiences in terms of, because then when we are making a regulatory framework, utmost importance is how do we register, administer, and when we come for valuation, how do we ensure the person is updated with the knowledge? So continuing education program, which becomes important ingredients, which now we are trying to introduce, okay, there should be a test every 10 years or 5 years when you come for renewal of your license or registration. You should be tested for some kind of upgradation of your knowledge, that you are updated, you are actually practicing, you are not out of profession. Because when you are dealing with any profession, you are actually handling with public assets, public money, public trust. Because when you are covered under regulatory framework, it means when an act or a regulatory framework is provided to you, the public trust is on you because of that regulatory framework. So regulatory frameworks gives you that public trust and importance. So from that sector, I think that it is very important, and we should have a regulatory framework, but on the other side, there are limitations. Because if we expect that the regulatory framework will give us security of what fees we will get, whether we will be paid properly or not, I think that is totally mistaken, because that is not ensured by any regulation or regulatory framework. And that is totally misunderstanding that because my experience with the government, that when we go to the government, okay, people are not properly paid, and that government said it is their profession, they are practicing, we can only define that this person can deliver that service. After that, those people are competing, you cannot define what price to be charged, or what cost, or what professional fees or remuneration to be charged. So that aspect has to be very well understood, because all of we are heading in a different regime. Today we are practicing in a totally different regime, and we are thinking, okay, when we go to regulatory framework, we'll get a lot of benefits. So it comes with a lot of responsibility, lot of question marks, and lot of other problems as well. Because when you administer, how do you administer? What kind of council you would have? Because whether you will, in the valuation council, you in all sectors you will elect people, or you elect people, or government nominates people who will be how sensitive towards the profession, what kind of people will look into the issues which encompasses all sectors of the valuation. So because in architecture or in a law or in any other profession, it is a definite set of education, definite set of people, sector which is represented by one representative. But in valuation, we have to actually think of how do we develop that, and every state in India would have different kind of problems pertaining to valuation, or different sector, different priorities, and every state has to participate, because we are a federal structure and we have to take on board every state government, every state. So what does that mean? What kind of representation comes from various states? How big is the council or the regulatory framework? How does various rules and regulation going to affect your day-to-day working? And whether it gives you more benefit or gives you more problems. Because at certain point, most of the people even feel that it is more problematic to have a regulatory body. Because most of the acts which were framed earlier, if you talk about the Bar Council Act or Medical Council government has already scrapped. Okay, they brought in new. And then because in the NEP, when we are talking the new education policy, I'm sure the government is looking at even modifying or taking over Bar Council or the Council of Architecture, many various other councils they are trying to merge with, or even AICT. Because in our council, we have like in Council of Architecture, we have some related professions. So we have representation from those professional councils or institution as a member representative nominated by their respective presidents. Like Institution of Engineers, Institution of Surveyors, and Technical Council. They all have representative on the Council of Architecture. But those acts are only a case study, because in the new system, what we are talking about, and what our experience in from 1972 till 2019. Now we are looking for what the basic problem which we found in our act is that people expectation that the fee to be protected, which cannot be done. The other which is important area which has not been addressed in most of the acts is the definition of who can practice the profession and what is this definition of that particular service which we are rendering, and to what extent, what parts come into that service. And then regulatory framework is about punishment for not delivering your service properly. So, if you are hired to deliver a service but you are not paid, how you should be dealt with? Technically speaking, when the complaint will come to a council or a regulatory body, they will say, it is not my job that whether you are paid or not, but you are hired, you discharge your services, you did not do it properly, so forget it, you are paid or not, because you don't deserve to be paid, but you need to be hanged. Oh, that is the fact. So, regulatory framework has lot of issues which actually need to be deliberated, but because when I talking to Dr. Sahoo, he was saying that it is only a consultative process that we are trying to explore. Whether if we should be going for a regulatory framework, what all should be included, because what all experiences we have in the past with various acts, they have their limitations, and we have now in 2019, we are more learned and more experienced as a democracy, as a country, and as a professional, that we know what are the problems. So by looking at the various case studies of all the existing acts and the government policy as of today, what we are trying to do with the national education policy, and it has to gel with that. So whatever overall national framework we're trying to bring in, I think before we get into that detail, we need to actually deliberate what it brings on board for all of us and how it benefits the profession. On one side, it gives us a promotion in the public eye, public trust is given to us by the way the government is saying we have framed a regulatory body and government is ensuring the quality service, so-called, because it is basically meant to be ensuring the quality service or quality delivery of the services through that regulatory body. That is the actual intent of the regulatory framework. But actually we are able to deliver that or not, that we need to, how, and then what in bring in board for the professionals. Because we get trust, whether we get work, whether we get protection of the law, to what extent, on performance of our services. If everything is done due diligence and something went wrong somewhere, deliberately or otherwise, if it is deliberate, you need to be punished. If it is by a just amount of, say, not understanding or not clarity of the issues, because valuation will have a lot of such issues which have no clarity. Because when we were talking about his inaugural speech, we were talking about context, we were talking about it is not only a science and it is also art. Then we are talking, mixing a lot of, and it is also legal and may not be as straight as a legal framework would like it to be addressed to. So all that thing, I think when we, in the Council of Architecture, we are only 53 people who are decision makers, who are supposed to be the members. All are registered people, registered architects. So we have 1,15,000 architects as of today in the country. And then those 53 people, who out of which 35 to 40 people are nominated by various state governments and central government, and they administer. And 5 people come from the institute, and some from the allied institutions, and from educational institution. So I think before we get into that mode, all these aspects need to be a separate study and separate consideration, and pros and cons of everything has to be ascertained before we actually come to a decision what kind of council, what kind of regulatory framework, how would it work, because that is what we've been deliberating for a long time on the Engineering Council of India. So engineers don't have a council, and the Government of India is deliberating for a long time on Engineering Council, because engineering is also a lot of subsets, lot of professions. So definitely engineers also need kind of a regulatory framework, but at the same time, most of the people feel if working without a regulatory framework is also very good. But because they say, because the architect friends are doing this and we also want this, because they need to understand how, what it brings on table for you and what it's not. So I think the engineers been deliberating for this issue for last 20, 30 years for bringing, and now the government had set up committee. I think we all will make suggestions, and we'll all deliberate on such issues, all these issues and parameters before we come to a conclusion whether we want a regulatory framework or not. If we want yes, then what all in that? And how do we control, how do we address all the professionals and all the existing regulatory bodies? How do we bring in and gel with all of them? These are my initial thought, and I think as the panel discussion progresses, in case any other thought, I'll just bring it on with you and share with you. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garg. Now it is the time for, of course, our Honorary General Secretary, IOV, Mr. Vinay Goel. And having over 35 years of experience as an architect, heading an architectural consulting firm, Mr. Vinay has come a long way managing his creations and developing a budding valuation body. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for none other than our Honorary General Secretary, MD and CEO, Mr. Vinay Goel, please.
We are moving ahead. Of course, we are moving ahead in the right direction or not, times will only tell. That is another thing. But as Mr. Vijay Garg, being the chairman of the Council of Architecture, and he has made a very good deliberation and a perspective view of how this Architects Act has performed. Perhaps it will give us some insights into how our profession has to take shape afterwards, going ahead. And of course, Mr. Johnny White, who has who has told us about how the things are there in US. Recently, I attended one Indian International Valuation Council meeting, AGM, where I met Mr. Johnny White also. And world over, I think we have some commonalities in world over, where what I grasped and what I observed, and a little bit change in professional dispensation according to the countries and all that. But one thing is sure that, and I'm hopeful, and you may call me a bit too optimistic, but India may lead in certain areas as far as the valuation is concerned. That is one thing. The way we are going and the way Dr. Sahoo is really working on that, that is the one. In today's scenario, when the service sector has a major share of revenue generation, capacity building is the most essential quality which for the professional dispensation. And in that, valuation is a very unique profession, because in valuation, all other professionals can enter. Right till now, it has happened like that only. But going ahead, we'll have to be a bit careful. As already deliberated also, there should be some set of qualifications, and we are almost on this point, agreeable to these points. And presently, we are discussing as far as how the government is proceeding towards the institutionalizing in a regulated way. Our view, what we have formed after so many discussions and all, that it can lead towards a regulated, self-regulatory system in operation, where the regulatory body like IBBI has an oversight, like Mr. Johnny White said, an oversight, not override, and then the professionals and their professional bodies. The idea for a suggestive model for institutional framework where you have to regulate the profession of valuers, it's education and examination, standards, curriculum and accreditation, regulating post-qualification courses, formulation of valuation standards, laying down ethical standards, peer review, acts as appellate tribunal in disciplinary and grievance matters to safeguard the rights, privileges and interests of valuers, to promote valuer education and to lay standards of valuer education. This is done in consultation with the universities and RVOs, to conduct seminars and talks on valuation topics, and to manage and invest in the funds for the welfare of valuers. Valuation, like other established professions, architects, advocates, engineers, doctors, all other professions, if you see, there are 6 number of professions which are regulated. And engineers, of course, engineers and valuers, they are not coming under any regulatory framework. But at the elementary level, education or knowing about the valuation is missing. So we have to go on the roots. We have to move towards the roots, and we need to stress upon the education and the quality in education and quality in capacity building. Then only we can think of. The capacity building is your qualification, and then how a person is performing, and that the way we are going ahead with the monitoring system in our this present framework of RVOs. The monitoring system can help us gauge where the shortcomings, or where the distance, where the making the person competent, and where the role of an RVO can come forward to help him in that sense. And the way IBBI, this rules, company rules, under this company rules, this whole system of registration of valuers, and it is quite, till now, I think it is quite producing quite satisfactory results. And we can move forward in the same manner, not much disrupting the already, because there are a number of disruptions already in this field of valuation. Previously, we used to have Section 34AB registration and other acts, and you have to get registered and under SURFACE Act, and so many acts you had to register. Now, time has come that we should come under one umbrella, one act, and thereby all other acts or all other various points of service handling flows through this act only, or flows through this council of valuation. So in our view, as far as IOV is concerned, or IOV RVF is concerned, of course, this is a tough time, we have to agree, but any change or any transformation cannot come without any pains. We have to bear some pains at the incubating stage. But let us think about the future. Let us think about how this profession can take shape to a established and competent profession where people can rely on us, we become reliable to them, and we become competent, and we take on the profession to greater new heights. Our take is that simply all of us has to work together, like Dr. Sahoo earlier said, that now the responsibility lies on all of us. We cannot shun away from our responsibilities. We'll have to think about it, and we have to think seriously about it, and we have to come in line so that this profession achieves newer height and the development starts taking place, and India becomes the pioneer in showing the world that how this word valuer and valuation is coined world over, and I believe in it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Goel sir. Now we've come to the end of this first technical session, and to sum up the entire session, I would like to invite the chairman of this particular session, the chairperson IBBI, Dr. M.S. Sahoo, please. Please join me welcoming him.
Thank you. In the first session, we had a prize for the best article, and that went to Mr. R.K. Patel for the best article in valuation. But I would like to congratulate him for winning the best article award for IBC, because it was valuation under IBC. So that only indicates how much of a valuation profession has embraced insolvency and bankruptcy in its fold. I would broadly copy-paste what the learned speakers before me have spoken. Absolutely, Mr. Garg was on the exact point that why a profession needs to be regulated, because what a profession does is not just for his client nor for himself. He has been given a specialized public function. All of you are aware the responsibilities medical profession has, chartered accountancy profession has, company secretary has. These specific responsibilities have been given to them based on the satisfaction that they have the right competence, they will behave well, they are fit and proper persons, they will conduct themselves well, and they will be accountable for their performance. These three things are required for a professional. He should have competence. There should be arrangement for competence to assess at the entry level. Also arrangement to improve the competency to meet the changing needs of the market. He must always be a fit and proper person, not only in his professional work. Recently, we had an order from Honorable Supreme Court in the matter of a chartered accountant that how the professional behaves even outside the professional work. Not that everything one can get into his private affairs, but there are certain, because society looks upon a professional as a model. If a professional does something with, let's say, auto guy there, newspaper will report tomorrow that professional of this category did this, howsoever small that event may be. So the reputation of Mr. X attaches to reputation of valuer in Mr. X. So that's why the conduct extends a little beyond the field of the professional knowledge. And as much as he needs independence in his work, he also needs accountability. Sometimes we believe that the regulatory framework is to regulate the independence of the professional. Absolutely no. What Mr. White told that the oversight, whatever mechanism we have, regulator, government, whatever, that must not override the established standards or practices. If I give an example from the profession of accountancy, all those professionals know if there is a transaction, which account is to be debited, which account is to be credited, and this has developed over centuries of practice, not given by any law. And that practice or custom has a force of law much more than any law. Valuation profession similarly should develop such standards which would be more concrete, more strong, even the law can't change it. So there should be oversight to ensure, oversight is generally to ensure the conduct part, because you are doing a public function. Generally in this conduct context, there is a debate. Sometimes people say that professional is a person who has his individual skill to render a service. It's not a business. Therefore, generally all over the world, we say that only an individual can be enrolled as a professional. Only an individual can be a doctor, or an individual can be an advocate, individual can be a chartered accountant. This is based on the premise that the liability of an individual is unlimited, while the liability of a company, we generally believe, is limited, which is not correct in fact. But generally we believe that if something goes wrong and I change a company, company has done something wrong, I change it, the liability of a company being limited, probably I will not be able to redress the grievance fully. But in case it is an individual, his liability is unlimited and I can go to any extent, and probably to the extent of criminally prosecuting him to address the grievance. The issue is based on the certificate of a person, be a chartered accountant, be a company secretary, be a valuer, some important decisions are taken. In case of, let's say, insolvency, the life of a company, decision about the life of a company depends to a large extent on the valuation figure given by a valuer. So market is taking such important decisions based on this piece of paper, and if this piece of paper is not reliable, decision is wrong. And that decision may entail huge cost on the economy. If somebody has played mischief and the economy suffers on account of misconduct, what can you do against that person? Except taking away his license. At the worst, you can take away his license, he will not be allowed to practice anymore. But beyond that, what is available? This is actually a matter to debate. How do you ensure a professional accountable? The other view is that let's make every profession a business. I don't know if you are familiar with the broking profession. Broking was a profession some time ago. But at that time, companies were not allowed to become brokers. Gradually, we started with partnerships, unlimited companies with unlimited liability. But now we have gone such a great distance that today, individual brokers have almost become obsolete. They are not seen. Even if they are there, they don't have business. Business has been taken over by the brokers who are corporatized, who has net worth, who has technology. Whether we would like that model. The world has actually not yet figured out between these two models of limited liability and unlimited liability. There are arrangements that have come up, partnership firms, let's say chartered accountancy firm or big fours. Those arrangements are there somewhere to pull the resources of people, but yet we have not moved completely away from an individual being a professional. In fact, that remains the general philosophy all over the world today. But how do you address the issue of unlimited liability of an individual when he does some mischief? The issues which are coming up when you discuss the institutional framework, many people think around only the pricing part. And the demand is generally that you fix a price, and if not, at least fix the floor. If I get a job, I must be assured of getting this much price, and there should be a framework to ensure that that price is realized, client is bound to give to me. Mr. Garg elaborated on this. I do not think that is in fact doable. If you fix a price, that means market should be such that at that price market clears. If you fix that the price is 10 rupees, and at 10 rupees valuers are willing to take work, there should be people to take that work by paying 10 rupees. Or if you fix 10 rupees is the price, there should be valuers who are willing to take the work at 10. Whatever arbitrary price you fix, probably that will not clear the market. And then, as I told earlier, we moved to a different model completely from 92 when we depend on market-based outcomes. And by market-based outcomes, we mean that there are two things, a control over price and quantity. These two market will decide, no authority, no regulator, no state, nobody should decide these two items. I am doubtful if fixing a price would not be considered anti-competitive, because then market will not clear at that price. And if you fix a price, what will you do? There is not enough work at that price, we will then get into lobbying, creating work for us, maybe sometimes creating unnecessary work, or sometimes going to authorities and asking that, please mandate that this valuation should be done by valuers only, or these certifications should be done by valuers. We have seen this kind of things in various professions. We hear that when you do not need a particular test or operations in medical science, doctors prescribe that because they want to create work. We have heard these stories. So if you fix a price, probably we will get into that model of lobbying for work for the valuers. Lot of debate is happening when you go to a new framework. We should think about that, what should be the shape of the things. Instead of that, we generally focus on what should happen to me. I am today doing a practice under some regulation, some law. Am I there or not? But we need to think simultaneously. Of course, there is a world over, the term used is grandfathering. Some kind of a screening is done to allow the existing people to come in. But going forward, we can't rely on this model that people will come through this route only and will not create a different structure. Every profession, as I told you, I am familiar with the government of the company secretary profession. We started with a certificate program, then a government diploma program. Then we moved to a situation that there is a full-fledged course. Everybody, if somebody is eligible after +2 to do that course, and then he comes directly and becomes a company secretary, similar to chartered accountancy or legal profession. So we need to think, possibly we will have 2, 3, 4 routes to come in. One is the existing people to come in. One is people who are, let's say, already engineer, chartered accountant, who want to do valuation. Probably for them, there can be a short bridge course or something. And those who want to start after class 12, for them there can be a long-term course university is delivering. So we have to keep all options open for two reasons. One is there has to be competition, and there has to be flexibility for the stakeholders to choose whatever they like. So the grandfathering we must discuss, but we must have a disciplined way of grandfathering. There's a huge consultation going on now. IBBI had about 10, 12 round-table discussions, but we have listed the questions around 40 sets of issues. 40 issues we have identified, elaborated each issue in 5 or 10 questions, put out on the website, and we have sought comments from public. You are all welcome to give your views on each of those, and in fact, once you give in that, that's an electronic form you are giving. Electronically, the information will be organized, and there is no way that the comment you have given, that will be lost anywhere. Once that goes into electronic system, it remains there and it has to be considered by the authorities. So I welcome and request all of you, please visit IBBI website, provide your comments on those 40 sets of questions, and that would help us to come out with an institutional framework that meets your requirements. Thank you.
Very much, Dr. Sahoo. And now it is the time for the felicitation. But before that, I hope when you are paying so much of attention and they were like, so much of information, you might be having 1 or 2 questions in your mind. So we have people. I would request if you have questions, we are ready to take 1 or 2 questions. Otherwise, during the lunch also, you can have a one-to-one conversation. Mr. Deb is having a question. Sir, I'll come to you. We'll come to you.
The question is a very common question from all the valuers. And I know that Dr. Sahoo always says that this should not be a question. What has already been discussed by the president of Council of Architecture. Well, our suggestion if it is in a form of question, that if there shall not be any discussion or any responsibility of the council or the authority to ensure for the professional to have their fees after the end of the delivery of the professional work, then why do you provide a provision of 6% fee or 2% fee or any kind of fee provision in the act itself? There shall not be any provision in the act. If you cannot ensure it, you scratch it. There should not be any provision of what shall be the fee of a professional. If it is there, then again, if you had to discipline, I mean, a professional has not discharged his liability properly, the regulator will take the decisions.
At least I am not aware of any law which says that a chartered accountant, a doctor, an advocate, a valuer, an economics shall be paid X percentage of the value of a service or somewhere linked to this or 100 rupees, 500 rupees. I have not seen any law in the statute.
And sir, no. See, if you have that understanding, that is totally wrong and misconceived. Architect, you please go and read Architects Act. It has no provision of protecting your fees. It does not say what fees to be charged. It is only some guidelines somewhere that it is recommended that one person should be paid for so much services, so much fees. Recommended. Please, it is not gazetted. It is not part of the law. It is only a guidance for the public. With the X number of services, there are 26 services listed for giving that 5% fees. But you provide only four services out of this 6 service. So that is not part of the act. It is not given in the act. It is not part of any act, as Dr. Sahoo has clarified. No government of India, no parliament has passed any act which is protecting your fee.
Next question, sir.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the last
This is
question.
for Mr. Sahoo, sir. Hello. As we go, question is for Mr. Sahoo. Sir, you proposed 4 systems for the membership. One was about exam, like after 12 and all, giving example of chartered and all. I am a supporter of that. I am a product of that. IOV had a system of exams for diploma holders appearing 14 papers and then getting an associate membership and after a few years your fellowship. But in your present position, there is no such system. So I have been debarred. But you are proposing this system, which I want you to serve, that IOV should conduct the exams after +2, and it is possible like chartered or any other association, and you could conduct from the ministry as a control. That will open up those who may not be and today you are not taking degree engineering or an architect directly as valuer, you want them to be a different product. So I have said that please consider this part.
And that will be the last question of the session. So please continue.
Hello. I am Harish Chawla, and about the fees, you said there is no fees fixed. There is a fees for the arbitrators, and that has been fixed in the High Court. For this much value, this is the fees. This is much value, so this is the fees. If it can be done for as per the valuation, to begin with, it can be done. And other thing is, I want to say, I'm engineer also, and I have worked in the government as a policy maker also. And Mr. White had said that everybody knows that there is engineer, there is doctor. At one time when I was in the engineering, nobody was knowing because there were 2 degrees were given. One is BE and one is BSc. When we had cards, the people used to say, यार BE क्या होता है? BSc तो हमने सुना हुआ है. तो इसी तरह इंजीनियर के सामने मैंने एक सजेशन दी थी at one time that we should write ER as engineer, DR as doctor, and so on. CA, it started later on. So I have a suggestion that if a card is given, some codification like VA, then the people will ask, yeah, what is VA? So that way the awareness among the people will come about the valuation also. This is my suggestion.
Thank you so much, sir.
Sir,
The
myself
suggestions.
just
the
was
su-
bad,
hello.
one question.
Sir, we
Mohit,
are really getting very late.
One
Let me tell
last
you-
question, madam.
Where are
Yeah.
Where are you?
This left
Hello.
side.
Okay. Sir, I really
Last
have
question,
to
please.
I have to tell you that suggestion can come later because gentlemen will be available during the lunch also. You can have one-to-one suggestions. The questions we have already taken.
Yeah, one.
Last question, shall I take?
Only
Excuse me, sir has a very important, he stayed here on my request only, so please, let us. Sir, I am really thankful to Dr. Sahoo to chair this session, Mr. Johnny White from ESA, and Mr. Vijay Garg, who has taken a precious time out of this thing and gave his insights. And thank you. Okay, felicitation. So we'll have just one, please, 1 minute only, one. So let's call off this session and proceed for the lunch. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, we haven't done with the session. Please have some patience. Indians need to have little more patience. I know we are very tolerant and we have a lot of patience, but this is the time for the felicitation, and after that, of course, we are proceeding for the lunch. And to do the honor, I would request Dr. M.S. Sahoo and Mr. Goel to come forward and honor our keynote speaker, Mr. Johnny White, and Mr. Vijay Garg, our speaker, is the chairman of the Council of Architecture, to honor him with a shawl and, of course, a memento. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much for being here. And you absolutely made it brilliant. Ladies and gentlemen, exactly at